Have you ever thought about how corn gets into your tortilla or a corn chip? Welcome back to Rooted and Restless. I'm your host, Marianne Smith Edge. As we always know, everything we eat, there's always a story behind it. And as I say, it's sometimes not as simple as you think. And so is definitely the case when it comes to a lot of our corn products. So today I have a very special guest that can really give us insight of how that corn that you see growing now comes out of the field and travels to what you might be eating. My guest today is Ben Scholl. Ben is the president of Osterbur Midwest Grain Company. And the fun fact is that I've actually known Ben probably, since grade school, high school?
Since I was 15.
Since you were 15, as that's what I thought, when he and his family moved to Owensboro. And I'm glad I can definitely count that his parents are definitely friends of mine as well. So, Ben, it's truly coming full circle to be able to chat with you today on a more professional basis. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and look forward to it. And it's great to see you again, if only through the camera for a minute.
Well, it seems like a lot of times we all talk through Zoom anymore, correct?
Yeah, it's especially living in South Carolina. I do more business over the phone or through the camera than I'd like to admit now.
Well, before we really get into talking about the journey, I think it's important to give a little background on what you really do. When we talk about Midwest grain, and sometimes people hear about the commodity market. So is buying and selling grain very similar to being a stockbroker?
Not really. We both are kind of beholden to the market a little bit. Like the futures market, you'll see prices quoted on a screen. So in that instance, we're not all that different. I'm what people in our industry call a basis trader. So I am trading the difference between what the actual physical commodity is. So I actually take and handle the product, and we deal in the future as well. So I will take things from where they're not to where they need to be, and there is a price difference in there, and hopefully enough room to show value to my growers and then also make some money myself. But we deal in future contracts, so what we would be doing, if you put it in stockbroker terms, is like trading what the price of Ford stock would be in 2028. So it's not, Ford stock is just the price today and the price tomorrow, and whatever it is trading is what it is. We have different prices all throughout 5-year stretch, and all of them come, and depending on where it's needed, it has a different price there as well.
So you really have to have a little bit of that crystal ball, so to speak. Perhaps
you do. You have to have a little bit of a crystal ball. You have to have good people on your side that you work with. You have to have some market knowledge. You have to have contacts with people. You need to know who needs it. There's not exactly a yellow pages for the things that I do. So you just have to make those industrial relationships through time. And I've been lucky enough to do that. And then you need a whole lot of God on your side, because at the end of the day, we're all beholden to the weather, and our success or failure is sometimes out of our hands.
That's true. That's the beauty of growing crops, right? A lot of things are not in our hands. So I think a lot of times, especially when you see a lot of corn being grown, and I know you look at your website, you deal with a lot of corn, some soybeans, and the perception is that we're just, especially in the U.S., we're just growing corn for animal feed. But if I look at your website, it's obvious that you're really looking at securing corn, and we'll talk about the type of non-GMO corn in a little bit. But what's really the difference between, from me going down the road, and I know what we grow is for predominantly animal feed, but what's the different characteristics that a one has to have, like some type of like a PepsiCo or that was looking for corn, what characteristics have to be different?
There's a lot of different types. Just like any plant or any person, there's a lot of different types. We all look different, um, act different, have different characteristics. It's not unlike corn as well or beans. They're all looking for something different. One thing that we deal a lot in is like white corn, and that's a big crop in Western Kentucky as well. We have a lot of different end uses for it. So it can be a color of the corn because of the product they're making. You touched a little bit on non-GMOs. I mean, you have GMO and then you have non-GMO, and all GMO and the base characteristics of those two products are really the exact same. What they have is a layer of protection in there in GMOs that are resistant to certain chemicals, whether it's a herbicide, insecticide, uh, anything like that. I primarily work in non-GMOs, so my farmers have to take a little bit different tactics and planning of how they treat their crop because they can't use some of those chemicals because that will kill a non-GMO plant. But buyers can look for anything. They might want extra low moisture corn. Something we might touch on is like stress in corn, like just the little cracks. They might want real hard whole kernels because that's what a lot of millers use for things that we actually eat when we talk about tortillas and the like is they're actually trying to get extract the germ and starch out of the corn so that they can look for a lot of different things. And each product that we handle has its own set of standards and different factors that the buyers are looking for.
Well, and that makes sense when you talk about the kernel. So if I put it in food stuff, obviously a cornmeal, a polenta, can be from the same but may not, or the corn chip is that whatever that end user product is. Just like if we bake something, you have to have whatever you want the end product. The characteristics have to be there, right? So, let's touch on GMOs and non-GMOs, and then I want to really for you to trace kind of the journey of kind of corn from the crop, what all it takes, because I know you're dealing mainly with non-GMO, and of course it's whatever the customer wants, but the reality is if I look at the studies and that. Really a GM product is not going to affect human health. We've looked at it 20, 25 years, but also we know that there's still some perceptions in that regard. So what's, what drives that market for non-GMO crops?
What's interesting, and this is very broadly speaking, the United States is certainly much more comfortable with GMOs. They are when we go shopping, when we go to the grocery, we don't look at, GMOs or non-GMOs. I'm certainly a fan of non-GMOs because it pays my bills. That's a market that I get to participate in, but we don't exactly buy exclusively non-GMO. There are other parts of the world, though, other countries that just never really got on board with GMOs. It wasn't that it was proven unhealthy or it did, your arm was going to fall off if you ate it. It was just the unknown wasn't worth the risk in some cultures to adapt to it. So where we're actually trending more towards, GMO acceptance, there's a lot of the rest of the world is probably more so still trending towards non-GMOs for food grade and for human consumption. Now they do feed their animals GMO products because at the end of the day, it's passing through the animal, and it's the value add is the animal. But I would say that it's just an acceptance thing, and it's a market that luckily we get to participate in. But the uplift is worth it for the human, but not necessarily the animal. Is kind of the way I read the global non-GMO versus GMO market.
So, I'm curious because we, John and I, we have farmland where we do grow corn or soybeans, and they're obviously the traditional GM. But I was just thinking, because I don't even know if I really do know this, is if I said, okay, we're going to grow non-GMO, what's the what has to change differently? Is it similar to like moving from non-organic to organic, or what has to happen to make it?
I kind of consider it the stop off in between regular conventional farming and organic. It's just when you apply your herbicides, the type of programs that you have to put in there. You can't just go over the top of the crop with a Roundup. It would kill the plant. So the systems and how they have to tackle, there's a few different I guess insects are a big threat to crops. Weeds are a big threat to crops because weeds compete for resources, whether it's water, light, anything like that. And then insects, weeds, and then like funguses are another one that, especially later in the season, about this time of year when it's hot and humid, you can see corn start to look a little ugly in the field if you're out driving around. You can get into those different types of things. So some of that has protections actually in the seed. Others are it's just resistant too. So farmers have to make more passes through the field, put different types of applications on, which would help prevent those different things from taking hold in their field.
So is it, I mean, obviously a lot of times when you do more specialty to everything you just described, a little more work involved, but at the end of the day, is that the return on investment worth it?
Like any market, our market moves up and down. Sometimes it's massive payoff. I talked earlier about white corn. Uh, let's just, for easy math, say the farmer would fetch $4 for their corn. That might pay 50% more at times when it's really, really tight out there. So it can be extremely worth it. There's other times like with just regular non-GMO corn, like right now, it's a very saturated market because farmers like to grow non-GMO seed, even if they're not raising it for non-GMO products because it's cheaper. So to say, is it worth it? I think it's worth it because in some respects, people do it without even participating in a program like mine because it just works economically on their farm. Unfortunately, for my customers and the people I work with, that puts pressure on their prices because if everybody's doing it just to save on money, sometimes that can really hold down the prices of your end product if it's just if the market's just saturated. So they do have to take and their systems a little bit differently, and it takes a little more care. And especially if you're going to hit a market destined for to be a specialty or a non-GMO market, you might have to dry it down a little bit more because this corn has to travel around the world, so it can't spoil. You might have to dry it at a lower temperature because we can't have stress crack or run a cleaner through it so we can get all the kind of what we call it foreign material out and it's clean and it's at the end of the day they just want the corn. They don't really need the dirt and the grass that was cut along with it in the products. So um, everything from how you raise it to how you handle it, to when you deliver it, how long you have to store it. It's all inconvenient, and that's why we pay what's called a premium on top of the market to compensate for all these extra things that you have to do.
You describe it quite well, the realities of, when it comes to farming. But I think it's interesting, and we talked about the journey, is just talk a little bit because you made inference to the fact that I think some of your end user customers are not probably based in the U.S. So the thought is, how does that, if I'm working with you, how's my crop, the journey that it takes from the crop into a finished product? And of course, it's going to depend on who's your end customer. But I think it's interesting because, after all, we don't really think about what happens between all the steps that it takes.
Sure, yeah. So the first thing that happens with a program like ours, we deal in stuff way out in advance. So like right now I'm working on next year's crop, 2027 crop for 2028 delivery. So we usually talk about how are we going to do this and how are we going to get this product to the end user 2 years in advance. So that's where we kind of start off what I would consider the growing contract with the farmer. We'll talk about it. It could be 18 months before delivery or up to a couple years. And so, when you drive out 54, 81, and you see the guys working in the field, the guys that work with me, you're not going to see anything different with them. They plant at the same time. They kind of go through, they work the soil the same way, plant, and it really all looks the same if you're just driving by it. Where it where it changes is after they harvest it and they go in the bin with it. We operate on what's called a buyer's call. So the farmer, it's October, the farmer has harvested his crop. He's drying it to a certain moisture that would allow this corn to stay in a bin for 6 months and then bring it in and then we'll ship it to Japan. So what would happen is we would find out we have a vessel coming to New Orleans. All our product primarily goes to New Orleans. When you're going over the Blue Bridge or you look out on the Ohio, you'll see all these barges being pushed up and down the river. That's what we load our crop on. So I'll call all the guys and say, hey, we're going to load 4 barges this week, and I need each of y'all to bring, 50,000 bushels, 50 truckloads. And we'll get in there. We take it just like regular corn, like anything else. We obviously have a battery of tests that we have to run to ensure that this product is what we're representing and what we're selling. We'll load those barges, and then a boat will come pick them up and push them down to the river. So we might load in Maceo, and then in 20 days, they'll be in New Orleans. Once they get to New Orleans, you kind of package them all together, and they take what kind of looks like maybe a chainsaw, but it's a massive chainsaw with buckets that just picks the corn up out of the barges, puts it into another silo, and then they bring in the big ship, which would hold maybe, if let's see, 2,000 trucks, I think would be an easy way for people to get a visual on it, versus maybe 50. And then they'll fill that up and take that over to Japan. And that takes and most of ours goes to Japan. So I'm going to cite Japan a lot, but that takes about 30 days. So when you see something loading out on the Ohio River, in 2 months, that'll be all the way across the world or sooner if you're going to a South America or EU or maybe Africa. We have corn that kind of goes all over the place, but Japan's about another 30 days at sea, and then it's there.
Well, that's fascinating, and of course, then it depends on when they mill it. But just to realize, again, we always say food we grow here is definitely can go anywhere, and that kind of leads us to the next question, which I'm sure you have lots of opinions on, is kind of the volatility of commodities. I think it's kind of interesting because even though I get a lot of ag emails and newsletters that come across my desk, as well as nutrition about, but we know corn prices, definitely commodity prices kind of hit the headlines for the public. So there's a lot of things going on, and what might be causing that. So I just want you to give your thoughts on where we are in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like historic volatility, it's moving a lot, especially with this administration. They have a lot of they do a lot of things that directly connect back to the farmer. So it moves a lot, sometimes not in the way we want. I it I feel like we're really consolidating. Like prices aren't terrible, but we're very close. It feels like that we're like 50 cents from despair to feeling pretty good about things. We've certainly had opportunities to be profitable. But there's so much more in the grain market under this administration because they're so worried about trade and trade deficits. The problem with for agriculture when you start getting into uh, different trade wars, for the lack of a better word, is that the easiest place to hit back at the United States is agriculture because that's one of our main exports, and there's a lot of competition around the world, so it's an easy place to displace the United States and go to run to a Brazil or an Argentina. So when we get into these back and forths with our best buyers and our biggest buyers, the easiest place for them to hit back is agriculture. Margins certainly in the last 2, 3 years have not been great on the farm. People are, making it work. But one of the interesting things with, we all know what inflation is. We all feel inflation every day. That's not different than what we life on the farm. Farmers' equipment, the most expensive combines now cost $1 million, and whether just like any other business owner around town, the health insurance, the just the cost of retaining and hiring new employees, everything's gotten more and more expensive. And so the price of our commodity actually isn't terrible historically, but all our costs around us have just blown up. So margins have been very tight. And if we would have talked 12 months ago, I would have had a much more dire outlook of agriculture, especially on the farm for the farmer and the producer. But and we'll probably hit on it, but we're given how much money we spend in the country, it's not hard for the United States when you look at line items to rip off $12 billion dollars and give them to the farmer in subsidies. So when you talk about our other spending, it's not a lot of money. And $12 billion dollars is a ton of money, but to a government budget, not so much. And so we're seeing more and more of that. So I think the farmers are going to be, I think they're going to be fine. I don't, I don't, and I think prices have some optimism ahead, uh, but it's certainly more touch and go than it's been maybe 5 years ago.
Now, let's hear from Mindy Herman, registered dietitian, food and nutrition writer, and a guru on all the latest food trends.
Hi, Marianne. It's farmers market season, and did you know that about 80% of consumers surveyed by the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Farmers Market Coalition say they shopped at a farmers market at least once during the year, and that about half of those go to a farmers market 6 or more times a year? Shoppers say they go to farmers markets for fresh, high-quality food because they want to support local farmers and because they enjoy the farmers market experience. More than 3/4 of attendees report eating healthier because of farmers markets. Many farmers markets accept Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP benefits, which help lower-income individuals access nutritious food. Among farmers market attendees who also participate in SNAP, nearly 3/4 are interested in using their SNAP benefits at the farmers market, and farmers markets also are a key element in many food as medicine programs.
Now, let's return to our conversation. So let's talk about subsidies. This is, I mentioned to you before we started, is you're a perfect person to talk about it because, in my world, a lot of times in public health or just in general, people make very broad statements sometimes about subsidies, which may or may not be true, but, that really don't have the knowledge behind it. The three things that I hear a lot of times, and you mentioned farmers are getting rich due to subsidies, or the reason that we have cheap food and therefore a more unhealthy population is due to subsidies to grow more corn or soybeans, or even the fact is that subsidies, that's the reason why so many farmers, why we grow corn and soybeans, because it's viewed as it's supplementing it, and that's why we're not let's say, growing specialty crops. So I'll throw those all three at you, and you can just pick and choose. Or
Sure. So I'll start this by saying, we farm in Central Illinois. I'm not just a grain buyer, but we have our family farms up in Illinois, and we are the recipients of subsidies like every other farmer. I don't think that we all set our watches to it and are like, oh, it's, subsidy day. Let everybody go check the mailbox. Like,
exactly.
it's certainly not that happy of a topic or something that we just look forward to. We realize that it's part of life probably now for a while. And I don't know how to tackle this question. So I would say by and large, let's start with farmers, and the ag industry in general are not fans of subsidies. The farmers tend to vote conservative. They're not fans of welfare or any kind of government programs. But everybody and their brother is going to take that check, because if not, you're doing a disservice to your business because your competition is going to get ahead. That being said, I don't think the abundance of food, I don't think it's affecting our health choices, because at the end of the day, we do choose what we eat. We certainly have availability, of plenty of items with high fructose corn syrup in it. There's no shortage of that on the shelves in the United States. So I do think I don't think that you can draw a direct line though to that. I think that's just, we all have a big sugar tooth in this country, and I'm as guilty as anybody of that. But I don't think that subsidies necessarily play a role in what we choose to eat. It's more of availability. And for a while, it was about where can you get cheap calories, and I think that did more for kind of choices of what you're going to eat. Um, so I do think that it's part of life, but also I have a little bit different take on subsidies. I don't consider it much as a bailout for um, the farmer, because I think if the farmer was struggling, I don't know that they would get the subsidies. Really what it is because the economics are such in the United States, we all owe a lot of money to major corporations. That's why we get the subsidies. It's not necessarily so somebody can go buy a new piece of equipment or a new piece of land or a brand new pickup truck. That's because we owe people like Farm Credit. We owe people like John Deere. Um, all these major companies. So the people that really advocate for the subsidies isn't really the U.S. farmer. It's all the people with a bunch of lobbyists that the farmer owes money to, and they say, you better give the farmer money or otherwise we're going to lose a lot of money. So I think it's a little bit of a misnomer as to who is actually a proponent of subsidies and where that money actually goes. It's so the major banks don't have to write off a major line item because the farmer defaulted on them. The government pays them the money. The money goes back to the bank or to John Deere or to any number of companies, and they can get made whole. It's the farmer's just the pass through.
It does put it in perspective as well, of like who loses or who's wins, and it's not always what's so obvious. So since you deal with, as you said, crops a year to almost 2 years in advance, and with some of the current environment, as we just talked about, where's your crystal ball on where do you think U.S. agriculture will be in 10 to 15 years? Do you see any shift in some of what we might grow, and especially since seem to be getting a little more competition from some of the other countries?
Yeah, I think the U.S. needs to diversify in what we raise. We are certainly a mono crop culture. We're corn, beans. We used to be wheat, and there's still plenty of wheat in Kentucky, but in the U.S., we're not the breadbasket of the world anymore the way we used to be. It used to be we're feeding the world, we're the grocery store, all that. Um, I hope that in the next couple years, when we turn the page on trade policy, that we are still looked at as one of the our most competitive, our biggest competitive advantage in the United States is our reliability. We have a river system that allows us to export food very efficiently, very quickly. If somebody needs something, we always seem to have an offer for them. With the policy that we've been dealt 6 out of the last, whatever it's been, 14 years or whatever, we're losing some of that reliability. We pick trade fights. So we continue to lose market share. Then we'll swoop in and we make a great deal with China, and we go back to them buying what they were buying before. But the fact of the matter is, we do have places like Brazil and Argentina and, maybe one day Africa that could grow these kind of just regular corn and beans. And we're going to have more and more competition. We're going to have to get more efficient. We're going to have to find better ways to do things or raise something different than just regular corn and beans. We do a good job in the United States of driving our own demand, whether it's biodiesel policy, different fuels that the majority of these crops now don't end up on your grocery shelf. They end up in your gas tank. So energy is going to play just as much of a role. And we can see how nasty energy can get and the need to be self-sufficient both in energy and have different sources of energy based on, dust up, when we start lobbing bombs back and forth with Iran, or even when Russia and Ukraine got into it, to transport things got extremely expensive. So I think you're going to always, I do think that the policy of taking care of America and kind of America first in terms of feeding ourselves and fueling ourselves is going to be a thing. I think when it comes to exports, we're going to have more and more competition. I think the outlook, I'm actually pretty excited for U.S. agriculture and on the farm. I think they're in a good spot, and I think better times are ahead because we are making some really good, smart decisions domestically with domestic policy on fuel and on different biodiesels. So I think, things that we could see today, like to the layperson, I think before I'm out of here, there's going to be autonomous tractors that maybe the idea of the farmer and the prototypical farmer could be different. It's going to be much more businessman and than maybe just a guy out in overalls or whatever you think of a farmer. But we will see autonomous equipment that will reduce the amount of people that actually have to work. Could we have autonomous semis? Sure, that could come as well. So we'll have some technological advancements for sure, but how things move, the relationships, I think they're still going to be really, really important. And I don't know that the industry looks too much different. Just how we do it might change a little bit. But yeah, I think by and large, if AI is taking over the world, the last thing it's going to get its hooks in is probably agriculture, because we are the slowest to change. And, the farmer and people like myself don't want to just sell something on a screen and say, here you go. We want to pick up the phone, know who we're talking to, know who's growing our food, and have that interaction.
So sometimes maybe in regards to AI, perhaps it's maybe good that as farmers we're slow to change, right? So I do have another question as you were talking, though, is that, the big thing that in some of the conversations that I have is one of the things is GLP-1s medication are definitely a lot of ag business people I'm around. That's the first question I get, and I've been to several conferences and meetings recently about how, we've talked about environment from volatility and trade, but GLP-1 medications are here and they're not going away. And I know I just read a couple of public articles, one especially by Michigan State, projecting that the decrease in some of the corn, wheat, but they also mentioned they really felt like that there was a potential for an increase in growth of of specialty crops. Just curious from your perspective. Had any discussions around?
No, but this isn't what is happening with GLPs. I do think that I mean, you can read an earnings report from PepsiCo, or it's already here. It's happening. The amount of calories that the typical person in the United States is eating is going down. But this is like just one of a lot of different changes, especially here in the United States, that we haven't seen before. Another one that hits close to home is the drinking habits of people, especially younger people, and they're just not drinking as much, and that hits home in Kentucky with bourbon. Bourbon's
Exactly.
certainly feeling it now. A lot of our corn that I deal in is destined for a barrel, and especially in Kentucky and southern Indiana. And drinking habits are changing, whether it's if they do partake in alcohol, what kind, and there's bourbon certainly has experienced ebbs and flows in its history, but you're seeing a complete move from the younger generation away from alcohol. That and alcohol is a big um, end use. I mean, of the non-GMO yellow corn I ship, I think 70% either ends up in Asahi, a Sapporo, or maybe a Coca-Cola. So in Japan, so it's a big user, and you're seeing a shift of the younger generation moving away from that. GLPs certainly, for anything with high fructose corn syrup, which is about just about everything that has is sugar based, it has it in the United States. So those are things that I think continue unless we find out there are some disastrous side effects from GLPs. I think that's going to be a thing that's here to stay when it becomes pill form. For some people, it might even become like a vitamin a daily. So it's something that we'll have to adjust to. I don't know that specialty crops would see a big in the market. I don't know that it's market moving, and here's why: because two-thirds of every bushel of corn grown in the United States ends up in ethanol or feed, or it goes out the door to another country. The amount of corn and soybeans actually used for food that we consume in the United States is minuscule. So I think for the farmer in general, it's not going to have a massive effect.
That's a great perspective, and thank you because obviously that's been top of mind in a lot of discussions. So, talk about food, wrap it up. As I might have mentioned, is that everybody has you have been, I would say, you have been since birth exposed to really good food because your mother is a registered dietitian, a friend of mine. We used to work together. I know she's a good cook, as well as, of course, your father has worked in a similar business as you. So we've talked about corn, but what's your favorite food story around the table?
My food story, I don't think there's one. It's more about food in general. One of my favorite things to do is travel, and through my work, I've been able to do so. My favorite thing as it relates to food is probably just generally speaking, how it brings a sense of community when you share a meal. That's why you just can't get to know somebody, and you can't get to learn about somebody or a new culture doing anything as much as you can by sitting down with somebody that's not like you, that is different, may have different perspective, and share a meal with them. I got to do that quite a few times in Japan, and it was what's cool about going to Japan for me is I get to go see, and a lot of people don't have this opportunity, but I get to go see with the crops that we raise where it ends up. One of their favorite things to do is take me to my customers, love to take me to a grocery store. Yep, this product right here, this is our waxy, or this is our non-GMO yellow, or this is our white corn. This is, the miller. And I get to see all the processes. I get to see it come off the boat to the elevator, and then I get to sit and eat with them. And I was a picky eater growing up. My mom had to cook a lot of different things because she had to force me to eat different things. But there's no other place that I get a sense of kind of who people are, like sharing a meal with them. And when I go to Japan, you're forced to eat new things. I think the last time I was there, I don't even know what it was, but it was a fish and it was probably yay big, and you could see right through it, and it was looking you dead in the eye. And they ordered it for an appetizer. And I don't know if it was just to play a joke on me, but they ordered it and I ate it. And it was some very, very salty fish that had eyeballs, and there was a lot of it, and I was expected to finish it. So, with enough sake, anything will work. So, I don't really have a particular one food story, but I just more food and trying different food, traveling and learning about different cultures and learning about different people that I get to share a meal with is probably my bigger takeaway than the food I'm actually eating.
Well, and I'm a similar traveler like you, but I totally agree. I think that's the best way to really wrap this up is that we talk about commodities, where food goes, how it grows, all the kind of less maybe not as warm and fuzzy, but at the end of the day, everything that you do, everything as farming does, actually comes down to what you're just talking about is getting that food around the table, and to really talk about the best is really making that connection about food around the table. So, Ben, thank you. Even though we didn't get to share a meal around the table, I'd love to do it again someday, but I feel like it was great that at least we virtually had a table to talk about what you're doing and really give us all a perspective about the bigger world around agriculture and just how our food really gets on the table. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Rooted and Restless. It's all about digging deeper into the behind the scenes about food, agriculture, and nutrition, because after all, every food has a story, and sometimes it's not as simple as it seems. Subscribe to Rooted and Restless wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us on YouTube.